Hello, and welcome to Book Circle Presents The Abigail Incident. Our heroes, Gus and Doug, after a busy morning of scoping out the magic situation in Abigail, have decided it's time for lunch. A little over an hour later, they were on Abigail's Main Street in Andy's, wrapping themselves around club sandwiches after the buffalo wing appetizers and the creamy onion and potato soups. "And the prices," Gus remarked, "make Chicago restaurants look criminal." Well, Chicago after all. But cheap or not, I really don't care. We've saved the circus quite enough money living off the land, and I'm ready for... Their phones rang. Doug pulled his out and put it on the table between them. "Hello," he said. Just then the waitress showed up. "Care for dessert?" she asked. "We've got apple and cherry pie on special." "Yes, please," said Gus after swallowing hard. "Which?" she asked. "Both, a la mode." "Who gets which?" "Each gets both," Gus answered. 4 slices total." Gus nodded confirmation while chewing. "You big guys aren't getting filled up right," she opined, and marched off to fix that. Once she was gone, Theano asked from the phone a little timidly, "Do we feed you enough?" "Oh yeah," Gus assured her, finishing the last segment of club sandwich and starting in on the remains of his fries. "It's feeding ourselves on the road that's hard," Doug told her. "If you try to make any kind of distance and hunt and practice, you get behind on one or another." "Maybe you should have taken the bus," Theano said. "You still could." "No," said Gus. "We've decided beforehand we wanted to practice the new shapes." Belatedly, he glanced around to see if anyone was listening. It seemed not. Doug chuckled. "You don't want your weir lions hungry all the time?" Theano answered with a slightly nervous giggle, then changed the subject. "I found some stuff on Dolores Graves in her house." Her weir lions gave go-ahead grunts as they traded fries and onion rings. "Her house is a little over a century old and has been empty most of that time. Saul Horbinger moved back in 1946, but had to leave the next year when they found his mortgage was a forgery. In 1968, his son Jabez bought it, did a lot of renovation, but couldn't keep up property taxes, filed for bankruptcy, and moved out. He tried again in 1989 and stayed there until 1997 when he died. Census says there were 4 other people living there in 1990. I haven't been able to trace them, but one was a Dolores Horbinger, who is in fact our Dolores Graves." "Married a Mr. Graves?" asked Doug. "No, she just changed it. So did her brother Agrippa." "Agrippa Graves," mused Gus, tasting the name. "Compares favorably with Agrippa Horbinger," said Doug. Gus nodded. "But I'm wondering why he didn't change his first name to Bob while he was at it." "Anyway," said Theano, dragging them back to the topic, "Dolores and Agrippa came back to Abigail 5 years ago and bought the house from the bank, which had repossessed it by then. When Jabez died, the rest of the family just moved out. I have no indication that anyone in Abigail realizes Dolores and Agrippa were the 2 people who moved out in 97, or realizes it now. Then, a year after they moved back in, Agrippa died." "Of?" Doug asked. "Anorexia," said Theano proudly, pleased to deliver a surprise. "And the really fun part is that Dolores collected the body from the hospital in her car. At least, the hospital record says the body was collected privately, and we know no more of Agrippa. No funeral service, no place of burial." "Is this the point at which Dolores becomes a recluse?" asked Doug. "I can't tell," Theano replied. "She's not on social media now, and she never was." "Does she have anorexia?" Gus asked. "She might," Theano answered. "I can't find images of her anywhere or any medical records. The only things she spends money on are property taxes and groceries. She has the groceries delivered, and it isn't much." "What?" asked Doug. "Every week the same. Bottled water, beef jerky, some fruit, and bread." At this point, the waitress came with 4 slices of pie a la mode. She was a little puzzled that these two excellent eaters did not dig in immediately, though they said thank you in somewhat distracted tones. Bad news on the phone, she hazarded, noting it lit up on the table between them. But then the blonde one dug in with a nearly ferocious expression. "It's great," he mumbled. "Doug, get started." Doug looked at his friend, looked at his double dessert, then started in. The waitress smiled at them and moved on. "Austerities, I bet," said Gus, still mumbling around pie a bit. "Where does her money come from?" Doug asked. "Ill-gotten gains, I expect. Deposits by money order show up in her account irregularly, and I haven't been able to trace them, which is odd in itself. She has things set up with the bank for the taxes and groceries. She does nothing to deal with the public. No water bill, no electricity. She is a professional-level recluse." "Gus, I think you're right about the austerities. She's not well off, but she could eat better than she does. Even if she couldn't, she could at least vary the menu instead of ordering exactly the same thing every time. So eat your pie without pity." Mages could boost their energy levels by practicing austerities such as fasting. "I suppose it could be pure nuttiness," mused Doug, pitilessly eating pie, "or some religious discipline." "It could be, but it's not," returned Theano. "What I told you up to now has been from mundane hacking with a little help. But we know there's magic going on. I caught it 2 states away. You guys spotted it yourselves. Going straight Pythagorean on the data you gave me, I got nothing good. 7 and 9 agree there's negative magic going on. 12 is not pleased with her." Gus and Doug glanced around for any unpropitious listeners, but there were none. They had become used, as far as possible, to their own altered, enchanted natures, but they were not yet used to the way Theano referred to integers as if they were consultants she had spoken to over coffee. "Any idea what our next step should be?" asked Doug. Theano sighed. "Not really. Keep on investigating. Keep us informed. Cope with what you find. You are the men on the spot, Teddy Roosevelt's men in the arena." "Your confidence in us is," Gus paused and then concluded, "heartening," just as Doug said, "dismaying." "Yeah, one of those." Replied Theano, apparently not listening. They heard little papery noises as she consulted notes or references. "You want advice, huh? Tip so the check ends in 14 cents. Go rest." "Yes, ma'am," they chorused. They tipped generously, thanked the waitress warmly, and ambled their way back out of town. They found their packs just where they had left them, behind the little stand of trees by the hybrid corn sign. "Want to draw straws for first watch?" Gus asked as they sat down cross-legged in the grass. "You sleep. I'll take first watch." "Thanks." Gus pulled his sleeping bag out of his pack and lay down on it. Doug lolled back against his own pack and gazed at the sky. Soon he felt a change in the quality of Gus's silence and knew his friend was asleep. Doug sighed and lolled further back. The sky looked unmoving, forever deep. Even to a city boy like himself, the corn and the trees and the gravel road looked utterly ordinary. His very body felt ordinary, his senses merely, exactly human. "What a long, strange trip it's been," he murmured to himself, softer than a whisper, quoting a favorite line of his grandfather's, especially a favorite after Doug had come home last time. He and Gus had served in Afghanistan together, come home together, and found together that they missed Army life, or at least some features of it. So, together, they had gone out to Iraq to seek work among the military contractors. They, along with 25 other young men, thought they had found it. But the contractor had turned out to be, well, a wicked fairy. Like the fey folk of old, she stole people, this time thrice 9 young warriors to be fighters in her own wars. She bound them to her, mind and body, minds under magical compulsion, bodies turned into scaly-tailed lion-dragon men, ogres or trolls, unfit for the mortal world. She dubbed them the Rauerhoth, the lion host. They had not known what they had become. They spent 3 years not knowing, or how much time was passing. Then the Fae had died in battle. Their captor's foe was not nearly so callous. He had not taken them as spoils, but neither did he know how to change them back to human form or return them to Enarath, Middle-earth, home. So the 20 survivors had wandered from one world fragment to another for 2 years, unsure how many years had already passed, until at last they met, by good fortune, the Grand Normans. Grand Normandy was an entire micronation, existing on everyday Earth, but scattered in tiny enclaves and hidden from public notice by the Sundering, the luck that hides magic. For the Grand Normans, though human, dealt extensively in magic, else how could they have been exploring deep in the outer zones of reality where Doug and Gus and their friends wandered? The Grand Normans, or at least the ones the Rauerhoth encountered, were generous and compassionate. They had taken them home, equipping them with illusions to look human. At least as important, they had explained what had happened to the Rauerhoth. When Faes take mortals, they do not just kidnap, they recruit. Doug and Gus were now Faes. A Fae is an immortal shapeshifter. Despite all that, even because of all that, they wanted to go home. So, not so very long ago, Doug and Gus had shown up at O'Hare Airport, wrapped in glamour to look human, and had simply gone home. At first, there was shocked rejoicing. They had dropped the illusions and shown their families truth. Joy was mixed with consternation. It had taken some doing to assure their relatives that they were really themselves, really Doug and Gus. But by diligence and luck, they had found someone to teach them the art of shape-shifting, so they had been able to resume their original forms. That had made life much better. But now what? They were still separated from their families by experience and doom and metaphysics. The answer had been the Windy City Fantasy Circus. There, they joined forces with other magical folk, though all mortal, in tracking down supernatural troubles and coping with them. As here. Doug examined his fate so far and decided this was, indeed, a worthwhile way to spend time. Possibly a great deal of time. He sighed contentedly, put his left hand behind his head, and with the right hand leisurely texted his folks and Gus's. They worried, after all. They worried, perhaps, that Doug and Gus would stop being human, though no one had said so out loud. So both of them touched bases with home often. Whatever the topic of news or gossip, the underlying messages were always the same. We're still here. We're still us. We're still shell-shocked. Doug and Gus had come through their Afghanistan hitch unscathed, but being kidnapped, changed into monsters, mentally enslaved, and lost, had been a whole new league of trauma. Neither slept well now. Both slept better if the other was on watch. Doug watched. His younger brother Sam texted back, asking how the lion business was going. Doug described the rapture with which he and Gus had eaten ordinary restaurant fare after too many rabbits. Sam suggested he and Gus could do something about the rats in the alleys near the apartment. Doug replied with a series of derisory emojis, then smiled. Being a Dishian Yao, an immortal monster, seemed not too bad right now. He noted all the different kinds of birds he could see, 5 kinds. All the kinds of trees, 4. All the kinds of weeds. He lost count. Were the clouds cumulus or cumulonimbus? Slowly, the afternoon got a little more golden. He began to get drowsy. He checked the time. When Gus turned over in his sleep, Doug said, "Your turn." His friend grunted, nodded wordlessly, and sat up. Doug lay down, folded his hands over his stomach, and closed his eyes. Gus yawned, stretched, and flogged his brain back to wakefulness. Had there been any good dreams? There were snatches of a bad one, not so much a nightmare as a memory. He was tramping through snow under starlight on a mountainside that became thickly forested further up. Pine. Above the pines were stars. He had learned to navigate by stars, but he couldn't any longer because the stars here were wrong. The pole was in Orion's belt. The sun and moon were too small. There was no moon tonight, but that didn't matter. He could see just fine because his eyes were slit-pupilled and feline, and his hulking 7-foot body wasn't even chilly under the homespun, the leathers, the chainmail. His ears twitched as the wind shifted. The tip of his tail brushed the snow from time to time. His body was as foreign to him as this place. He was exiled from his own place and his own shape. The only touch of home was his fellow exiles, especially Doug. He blinked and looked around at the warm, bright, flat landscape and at Doug, already asleep. Not a dream worth keeping. He had returned from exile as far as possible. He was home, and he had a job. He considered the job in hand. Dolores Graves, nee Horbinger, is being severely reclusive and doing something very magical in her childhood home, where she returned 5 years ago with her brother Agrippa, who died 4 years ago. Dolores took charge of the body, and it hasn't been seen since. Dolores has barely been seen herself, except for late-night strolls on the streets of Abigail. He considered possibilities. Something necromantic. Squirreling away your brother's corpse and being secretive and nocturnal sure suggested it. But what necromancy specifically? Was she, for instance, trying to get Agrippa back? Her house reeked and roared and radiated magic. Mostly glamour, Gus thought, though he couldn't be sure. Glamour hid things. What was she hiding? Was the house, for instance, in way better repair than it seemed? And those names. August Weisskopf knew that being August or Augie was a very different thing from being Gus, and it had no trouble believing magic was affected by names. Had Dolores and Agrippa been trying something like that, or was it just to hide their identity? Questions to keep in mind. The next step was to hike back into Abigail and poke around. Near Dolores's house? Not during daylight. Maybe at night as lions, which no one would be looking for. Doug's goal of fox shape made a lot of sense. Cats might be better still. Sparrows? Flying would be cool. He thought of calling their families, opened his phone, and saw Doug had already done it. Here was a new text from Sam. "I still don't know what you look like as lions." Hadn't they sent pictures? Scrolling back, Gus saw that no, they had only sent pictures to their parents, not to siblings. He fixed that, sending Sam 2 images, one of himself as lion sitting next to Doug as man, for scale, and another with Doug as lion and him as man. A few seconds later he got back, "Thanks, Gus. Holy crap, you're huge." Gus, "About half a ton each, we think. No scales handy." Sam, "It looks like you, the blonde." Gus, "It is me." Sam, "I mean the face is the same." Gus studied the 2 images. Yes, his lion face was squarer and Doug's more triangular, just as with their human faces, and there was maybe some phantom general likeness. It was harder to see than with the dragon cat Longmao faces. Gus. I guess so. Sam. What can't be cured must be endured. Gus grinned and sent back, "You little," followed by a string of cuss emojis, ending with a laugh emoji just to make himself clear. Sam. Gotta go. The lions are after me. Gus sent one more laugh emoji and pocketed the phone. He had a home and a job, and he had a family. 2 even, his own and Doug's. He basked for a while in the thought. Arguably, he had been made a monster and no longer human. He had been barred from heaven through never dying, but he had home and purpose and friends and family. Family. Dolores's issues were about family, 10-1. Her brother, of course, but Gus wondered if it wasn't more than that. He texted Theano. What happened to the other November people? Where are they now? A minute later, she answered, Good question. I'll get on it. Gus lay back down and let the long summer afternoon wash over him. The slow afternoon could hardly be said to be an evening yet, but the heavy lunch had worn off, and Gus was just beginning to get hungry again when Doug frowned, then grimaced in his sleep. Want to wake up now? Gus asked him softly. Doug opened his eyes. Yeah, he yawned and sat up. Back in the mountains? Yeah, winter night, up by the tree line, lost. Gus nodded. Let's head back. Right. But they didn't walk in unburdened this time. Instead, each took a small overnight bag stuffed with his karate chi. They ambled up and down Main Street since they had heard that Dolores did that often, then dropped in for supper at Andy's again. Their waitress from lunch was just going off shift, but dragged her replacement over to them and told him to do a good job for them. The replacement was a high school boy working one of his summer jobs and knew about the saber dance in the park. He asked eager questions about circuses and swordsmanship that slowed down his service, but he was still prompt about bringing a ground beef pizza and the stuffed chicken breast with sides. They ate at leisure and watched the summer evening creep in. Theano called. The November people, she reported, have a bit of a reputation in the sundered West and Midwest. They're cursed. It was right after the Civil War. They tangled with some coven or college of wizards over scavenging the goods of some mage who had just died. I'll save you the particulars. Anyway, the November people, they weren't called that at the time, the group didn't have a name, but the November people lost big. The other side not only got whatever the goods were, they devoted some thought and energy to revenge. They just have rotten luck, I gather, and dribble it around, rubbing it off on passers-by. Some of them have gotten jobs as coolers in Las Vegas casinos, and they're subject to psychic and psychiatric diseases. Like anorexia? Asked Gus. Exactly, and phobias and depression and addictions and OCD and like that. Poor bastard, muttered Gus. What about the psychic diseases? Asked Doug. Low or absent chi production, doppelgangers, haunt-prone. It can get mixed up with the psychiatric stuff. So, for example, OCD rituals can become austerities to generate chi and make up for the natural low chi rate. So Dolores may be one really messed up lady, reflected Doug. Yes, in any number of ways. Is it even really her that people see on the street at night? Wondered Gus. Could it be her doppelganger? I suppose so, said Theano. And if it is, asked Doug, what do doppelgangers do? Nothing much. Disappear readily, confuse bystanders, sap chi out of their source. They're basically astral projection gone wrong. Anyway, maybe they came back to Abigail as part of some scheme to undo the curse. Magic theory suggests it, what with the name changing, or maybe they just wanted their old home back. Gus swirled his coffee thoughtfully. We don't really know yet, he said, whether Dolores needs to be stopped or helped or left alone. And that's true, Theano answered, her tone reluctant. But the signs, yeah, 7, 9, and 12 don't like it, Gus cut in, trading looks with Doug. It wasn't that they disbelieved Theano, it was the idea of working on tips from numbers. We're still investigating, Doug said. We won't be hasty. Thanks for digging, he concluded in a goodbye tone. Talk to you soon, said Theano in the same tone, and hung up. Gus chewed a pizza crust, then said, So if we work for Theano and she works for the numbers, does that mean we work for the numbers? I don't know that she works for them, Doug replied. It's not like they have an agenda. They have opinions, or Theano talks like they do. Doug sighed. This is too weird for a pair of garden-variety lion ogres like us. Gus smiled sideways and snorted. But the whole issue of immortality rose up before him again at a new angle. Given enough time, and there would always be enough, would he find himself at the edge of reality someday with all the weirdness in the universe behind him, looking into what came next? Well, it should be interesting, said Doug, and I'll be there with you. Thank you, Gigi, said Gus. Neither he nor Doug noticed that Gus had never voiced his thought. And we'll follow them in their investigations next time.